because that is conflicting with what they advocate for. What they advocate for is progress. They want to reform the police, right? They say they want to reform the police. They claim that they are on the side of justice. They claim that they're on the side of marginalized communities. So they claim that they want to do something about the police, but in reality, they don't. And that's precisely why they get caught up with right-wing reactionary framing on issues that they're supposed to be advocating for and only fucking just criticize the left. Fuck the left. The left is politically insignificant. Shut the fuck up. We are politically insignificant. There's like 11 fucking people in American politics that could be designated as leftists. Okay? Stop fucking trying to bully 11 fucking people and the activists on the ground who have lost loved ones and focus on doing something. Anything.
Wow.
And not fucking just like giving more money to the cops. Not just, saying, oh, we're just going to train them this time. If anything you were saying is accurate, we would have seen a surge in African-American turnout during the election when we saw a complete opposite. In fact, saw an increase in Trump support that's likely not completely disconnected from defund messaging due to black men in high crime areas being turned off by it. So what you're basically stating here, again, does not go against what I am saying. The issue is you're not communicating anything. If all you focus on is just shitting on the fucking left, which is politically irrelevant, instead of fighting back against the reactionary framing, then you're going to fucking lose to Donald Trump of all people. Okay? Jesus Christ. It's not like the Democrats ran on defund the fucking police, brother. There's like 5 people that won that are now saying defund the police. But what are you? Are you telling me the National Democratic Party was running on defund the police? Is that what happened? Oh man, it was just too unfeasible. That's why for some weird reason all of the moderates, they lost. But Dems got a boost from the protests because Republicans were literally attacking the protesters and Dems were supporting them. Yeah, well, that goes against that argument as well, by the way. There's 2 ways to look at it. You are giving too much credit to Americans to understand policy. No, I am not. No, I am not. I'm not. That's why I always say 84% of cops in 2016 said they were going to vote for Donald Trump. Reframe the conversation around that if you want. If you want to draw up partisan fucking lines, draw it on that. Just anything. Just do anything but what you are doing so far. We basically have a group of steroided, hopped up fucking psychopathic Republicans that are completely unaccountable and are allowed to do whatever the fuck they want in regards to harassing individuals that are literally paid by those very same communities. The taxes those same communities they harass pay for their fucking salaries, which they then take, okay, and take to another neighborhood, a suburb that's all white for the most part, a suburb that has a higher level of income, a suburb that is a fucking Republican suburb. We're taking money away from black communities and black people, funding fucking a bunch of dudes that don't even live in that community, and funding those fucking suburbs so that they can have better schooling, so that those white suburbs can have better schooling, so those white suburbs have better access to opportunities. so that they can take additional funds and get more guns for themselves. This is a mostly predominantly Republican group of people with zero accountability from the law that are hopped up on fucking steroids, that have all the guns on the fucking planet and no legal system to reprimand them. And we just keep giving them more money and acting like this is something that is foundationally important. Then why is the activist framing not actually working and bringing about the transformative change in law enforcement? The message is not working. You need to be more clear. Bro, you can't fucking deal with activists this way, okay? You can't. What are you doing? Like, you work for the DNC. Like, you should know this by now. You can't deal with grassroots mobilization. Republicans don't even have grassroots. Half of their shit is astroturfed. Either you set up your fucking counter astroturf strategies, okay, and make it seem like that's what the fucking people on the ground want, or shut the fuck up and say, hey, we hear you, we see you, this is what we're going to go with.
So did Ab.
Abolishment of police departments is not happening. Defund the police is not about abolishing it anyway. There will always be a need for some form of policing. You don't have to call them. You don't have to call them fucking police. You don't have to call them anything, really. But there's always going to be a need for law and order in any fucking societal form, any sort of social formation. There's always going to be a court system, no matter what. And there always has to be a group of people that enforce that court system and the rules and their laws. Okay?
Poggers.
People who say no, there isn't are fucking 14-year-old delusional anarchitty babies who they themselves have not fucking read enough anarchist theory to comprehend that even in their fucking mythological utopian worldview, there would still be some organization. Okay? You can't throw a tickle party to ensure that people don't fuck one another over. Shut the fuck up. You don't have to call them cops. Okay? But even if you are democratically voting on every single hierarchical structure, every single law is democratically voted on in a direct democracy, let's say, okay? Someone still needs to fucking enforce it. Peace officers, whatever you want to call it. It's ridiculous. Yes, and by the way, anarchists understand this too. They're on the fucking front lines of this sort of activism. And guess what? They understand that it's gradual. That it's not going to happen tomorrow. Okay? That is actually a way better fucking framing from Noah. Noah is correct. This is a fear that I have expressed before. Defunding of police under current neoliberal order would just lead to the accelerated privatization of just another public service rather than actually doing something to help. But it's a grassroots slogan, so I get that get it though. I do think it misses the mark. It doesn't miss the mark. It's just that you don't want to fucking describe what the mark is. If you believe in progress, then you have to fucking do the underlying. If you believe in progress, and if you are a leftist, you have to recognize that we don't have the think tanks. We don't have the fucking focus testing. What we have are actual people that have legitimate fucking grievances. So what can you do? You can stand in front of the tide and say, no, 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 it's not time for that right now. No, no, no. What you're saying right now is actually hurting our cause. Or you can say, listen, I understand what you're trying to say. Okay? And while I personally think that maybe it's not the best messaging for all these fucking moderates, I'm going to do my best to describe to them exactly what it is that you are saying, because we all ultimately have the same fucking goals. Okay? When Donald Trump brings about a law and order message as a dog whistle for black people not wanting law and order because they don't want cops or whatever the fuck he's trying to say. That's psychotic. Because of course black people also want law and order. But the problem is, in underfunded communities, the presence of police creates lawlessness and disorder. Everybody wants law and order, unless you're a psychotic racist who literally thinks black people just want chaos and disorder and lawlessness. Of course they want law and order, motherfucker. The whole point of defund the police is law and order. Bringing about accountability for the police force is law and order. Stop falling for the reactionary framing. Bring me the fuck on. You are scared to have actually brought about change in our legal system with the ballot box that directly decreased the amount of people going to jail. That is literally how I started my political career, so don't tell me I don't know how to do this. I was doing this for over a decade ago when you didn't even know what politics was. Yeah, I didn't know what politics was a decade ago. Sure, I'll have you on, dude. Also, by the way, I'm going to be having David Dayen on later to assess the Trump cabinet picks. David Dayen of the American Prospect. They've done brilliant work so far.
Hassle.
So here's what I had to say. Here was the meme, rather, okay? So after I saw Obama fucking say like, oh, this is a terrible message, this is a terrible message, this is a terrible message. I said, in order to win neoliberals, you have to use their language. Try saying, instead of saying defund the police, try saying, we need to eliminate redundancies in the police force and better distribute newly freed capital into growth sectors like social work. You know, growth sectors that truly undermine the presence of crime and fight back against it. Like social work. It's clear that increasing investments in police has diminishing returns. And neolibs were like fucking, yeah, that's actually a lot better of a message. Like, what the fuck? Yeah, why don't they use that? First of all, are you fucking dumb? Like, how do you not recognize your own biases here? Okay? Like, how do you not recognize your own biases? This messaging is not appealing to anyone outside of the actual bicoastal elite, like fucking DC wonks and shit that spend all their time like reading Vox.com articles and thinking that they're brilliant. Okay? So that's one. And two, this is my whole point. If you think that he won't bring me on, chat, he's scared. Wait, I said, come on. The fuck do you mean he won't bring me on? Bitch, DM me. You haven't DM'd me, motherfucker. Of course I'll bring you on. Hold on 1 second. Let me finish this thought and then he's calling now. Let me finish this thought and I'll have you on in 1 second.
Has daddy.
Get the fuck out of here, chickening out my ass. Dog, you really think black Americans who are forced into situations by a white supremacist country where they have no access to education are able to accurately represent their needs? Wow. Wow, dude. Black people don't know what's best for them. They are literally just reiterating what they see on TV to no fault of their own. Complete abolishment and replacement with community members is the only way. Everything else is literally pulling wool over the eyes of black people for the sake of continued white supremacy. Wow. Wow, dude.
I got a circumcision.
No, that's an anarchist. It's not a liberal. That's an anarchist take on on black people don't know what's best for them. Whew. Okay. I would just dial it back a little bit. Okay. So The reason why
Hassle.
this is ironic because so many lefties like quote tweeted me and were like, Hasan is so fucking dumb. He doesn't realize that this is actually a good take. One, yeah, it's a good take because that's what fucking defund the police is. And also, you're literally failing to recognize exactly what I'm trying to say, which is, hey, if you know what this is, then fucking describe it to people, meet them with their with the way that they understand it, and fucking describe it to them. Okay, just do that. Do that. That's one, because it's demonstrably successful considering the fact that you literally just fucking said, "Whoa, this is good." That's one, and two, this is only successful in a very narrow framework. This kind of messaging. Okay. Oh. All right, now I'm gonna bring on Lib Bizzle right now.
When Bizzle comes on and starts crying, catch them in the mug and sell it as DNC
All right.
tears.
Hey, you there?
Chance to meet
Yeah,
cannons.
of course I'm here, dude. All right, talk to me, Mr. I've been doing politics for a lot longer than you've been alive. All right, let's hear it. What do you got to say?
All right. So the reason I get so fired up about this is because I actually agree with the goals of BLM and defund. I think like police departments are dramatically overfunded based on the results they actually produce. The return on investment is like terrible for, municipalities, for communities that are directly affected by the policing. I agree 110% of that. Okay. The problem is I'm a fucking realist because I've been doing campaigns for the last 15, 16 years now. Okay. The first campaign I ever did was while I was in college and in one of the biggest colleges in Texas, in a college town there, we elected the first student in like over 32 years city council. He was a black student. He was a student body vice president beforehand. And one of the main reasons we did it was because the city and the police department, specifically in the city, were treating young people and specifically young people of color dramatically differently than some cracker ass like me who was going to school there. Okay.
Shout out to speaker Pretty Moon Too Cute.
We actually won that election. We went to a runoff. We beat the establishment crowd, these bunch of like fucking old time Republican fucks who were there. By organizing young people and specifically communities of color around issues with the police department there. And we got people out even in the December runoff. So that's how people are saying origin story in chat. That's literally how I started my career. We followed that up the next year. We elected the first female district attorney in that county by 23 votes out of about 50,000. It was an extremely close race. And we did it on a campaign where she was running on deferred adjudication as the primary strategy for addressing nonviolent crime in her office, deferred adjudication is where you actually take people who come in and are arrested, and instead of giving them, criminal charges, you provide a path to actually, do reforms or do like some community service or something, and they don't get that on their record. And
okay, your bona fides are there. I got it. But let's get to the main matter at hand. I'm not dismissing that. I know you've done some great work. That's why you're here. That's why I'm not talking to some other random fucking person. I'm talking to you.
I know.
Okay,
but this is what I learned from that, though, okay? Is, one, if you base your messaging around one simple slogan, because of the attention span of voters and other people, okay? They are going to most associate directly with those words specifically, right? That's my only bone to pick with defund. Everything else they want to do, I agree with 110%, but I think they need to change the slogan on it. Like,
okay.
Here's a great example, Hasan, from corporate marketing. You know what the best slogan probably of any brand in America that's like 3 words long. Do you know what that is?
What is
like
it?
Almost anyone can identify. Chat, do you know what it is? What's a 3-word slogan? I see it. Someone said Nike, just do it. Exactly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone knows Nike by just do it. They were typing it in chat before I even said
you do know the difference between corporate branding and activism, though, right? Like corporate branding is literally supposed to mathematically target every single person, because it's inoffensive and make your brand seem as inoffensive as possible. It's reinforcing the status quo rather than undermining it.
Yeah, but this
Now,
goes
the
back to
goals of
how
defund the
linguistics
police,
work,
but
though.
the goals of defund the police are radically changing society. Of course, that it's going to be, no matter what kind of seasoning you throw on it, whether you call it refund the police or whether you call it demilitarize the police or whether you call it whatever you want to, ultimately there's going to be a lot of people that absolutely, without a doubt, are going to be scared by it. Now, why are they going to be scared by it? One, because they can't imagine. One, because they hate change. Most people do. And two, because they can't imagine a future without with a police force that might be undermined in their eyes, because they think perhaps inappropriately, as a consequence of social conditioning, that like cops are fucking preventing crimes from happening. Okay? But lastly, and perhaps more importantly, the reason why they're going to feel this way is because from every think tank all the way down to every single Republican politician in every single part of the Republican media machine is constantly pumping out the argument that undermining the police is going to cause a lot of problems, that it's going to kill you, that criminals are going to come in and rape your daughter, and cops are not going to do anything. Now, in the real world, what the fuck do cops do? Okay? I mean, that's seriously, like, it's not like they're out there constantly fucking solving crimes or stopping rapes. As a matter of fact, in some states, they're literally doing the sexual assaults themselves under coercive circumstances of people that they themselves have arrested. But having said all of this, I don't think we're in disagreement if you agree with. I don't think we're in disagreement if you agree with the cause itself.
I agree. I disagree with the way that they're going about doing it, okay? Because I think they've moved the Overton window, in effect, over dramatically. Because the majority of people in the country believe like major police reforms, law enforcement reforms are absolutely needed, okay? That means you need to shift it to a operationalization of it, right? Like, how do you get those reforms done? The problem with the defund, this goes back at, it's different than corporate branding, but the brain interprets it the same linguistically. Okay. It remembers those three words, that phrase, and what they mean, especially for the voters that are needed to actually turn out and vote to make this change. Those are primarily low propensity voters. Chat, that means they're less likely to turn out and vote. Okay. Those folks have less focus. They're lower information consumers. They don't watch people like you, Hasan, usually, okay? Though there's some in your chat, but they're not the majority, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're not watching or reading, things that you and I would read or folks in chat would read every day. So they have less of an attention span for it because they literally are the ones most under the thumb and oppression of these police departments. So they have bigger concerns in their life. They're literally worrying about if they walk down the street, they're going to get clapped by some like bad cop, right? So we have to adjust the messaging slightly just to make sure that it's more informative and appealing to them and doesn't scare them. Because right now, so I live in DC. Chat, probably you've talked about this, right? There have been shootings just in a 4-block radius of where I live, just in the last couple of months that haven't happened before now. Now I still live in an entitled privileged area. I live up on Capitol Hill. Okay. If you go across the river to Anacostia, where I have friends, has been a rash of shootings there, unfortunately. There's been an uptick in violent crime. That has been going on all summer during the pandemic, because people do not have, people are unemployed. There's harsher times, the economy's shit. There's all sorts of drivers of it. But that is the context for this past election and this defund messaging, why it is having an effect. Everything you've said before on local news radicalizing people, especially like rural voters, rural white chud voters, right? Completely accurate. And this year, why I think the defund argument on how it had an impact electorally is somewhat right is because of that. Now, why I think it is not working where it needs to is we saw a almost flat, if not a somewhat of a decline in turnout in urban cores across battleground states. In Michigan, in Detroit, on the initial count of the vote, there were basically Biden only got I think he got 900 votes less than Hillary Clinton did. It's gone up since then because they found slightly more votes in Detroit proper. Now he's at about, I think, 500 more than Clinton did. And in Detroit proper, it's the best example. In PA and Philly, Philly proper is the only place he had a drop in the actual like support he had as
Okay,
a percentage of
I have to
margin.
stop you there real quick because you've been going on for a while, and I have to at least address one point here. Would you say that there is a trend since Barack Obama, the aftermath of Barack Obama, that the Democratic Party has lost some of the black vote? This does not necessarily mean that they're going out and voting for the Republicans, and there are numerous different reasons for why. But would you say that the number of black people that are voting for the Democratic Party, with the exception of this past election, was already getting lower?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
It
Precedes, so it predates the defund the police messaging, is what you're saying. So it's a larger, it's accurate to say that this is a larger trend that we have seen for a while.
Well, I think there's some short context on that. If you take the 2016 result, basically you see a turnout nationally in the black vote receded back to the 2004 result. It's basically if everything between in the 2008 and 2012 election never happened and everything stayed the same from 2004 to 2016. The reason why I think this is important for right now is you see a decrease even from that point with this bigger focus on this police reform messaging, right? And
Okay, wait, but it is a larger trend that has been ongoing. It's like if you were to attribute,
no, it's like a return to the norm. That's all it is. Like Barack Obama as a candidate, because he was the historic figure, the first black president, the first viable black candidate for the presidency, produced an outlier result. That's why I think a lot of the strategy around the rising American electorate, the new American majority, is a foolish strategy because you're basing it off of one outlier figure that's like a once in a generation political talent on top of that.
Oh, so you're saying that? That we're never going to get black votes at the same level that we did with Barack Obama.
I don't know that we will. I'm not going to say it's never going to happen.
Okay,
but I think
we'll talk about the different parts of Barack Obama's strategy, his messaging strategy, which was quite radical, by the way. That's not true. That's only true for black women. Black men still went down and continue to went down. Yes. Not only that, but also another factor that I need to add here is that younger voters. It's not the older voters that are leaving the Democratic Party. It's the younger black voters that are leaving the Democratic Party, or at least admitting that they are no longer as beholden to the Democratic Party. This does not mean that younger black voters are actually, if you look at the trends, younger black voters are no longer as loyal to the Democratic Party as older black voters are. You've seen the same numbers I have, I'm sure. And
yeah, I agree with you.
And the reason for that is voter apathy. The reason for that is voter apathy. The reason for that isn't because of defund the police. If defund the police was truly the burden,
that's not my argument on it, though. Like my argument is that defund the police is not having a positive impact on electoral change on it. Like it is not working in a way to drive about the change you need at the ballot box to actually reform these law enforcement agencies. That's my whole point. Like,
okay, but we talked about an ongoing trend that predates defund the police. So attributing that, as you did originally, to black people not voting for the Democratic Party is I think completely false. Secondly, and we can have a conversation, by the way, around like whether asset owning older black people truly do want police to be in their communities. I think they do. You and I can have a separate conversation on that, but that's not what we're talking about. You said originally that like black people are leaving the Democratic Party because of defund the police. I showed you that black people are leaving the Democratic Party because of apathy, and also on top of that told you that the places where the black vote is hemorrhaging is not even necessarily the older black voters that would be more likely to want police presence in their communities, but actually the younger black voters that no longer want to vote. So it doesn't align with the same data that we are both looking at and acknowledge exists. So clearly the black voters leaving the Democratic Party as a consequence of defund the police is reactionary framing that you should not be adopting as someone who already admitted that they are progressive and believe that the ultimate goals behind defund the police are good.
If defund the police is working, then it would have helped stem that erosion of younger black voters, right? They had all sorts of messaging from third parties, from independent expenditure groups, dumped on them this past election hundreds of millions of dollars on police reform, and how elected candidates, how like even Joe Biden was proposing dramatic police reform, which he actually did in his policy proposal, right? Now, it wasn't as far as like BLM wants, like what they're getting in Minneapolis, for example, right? But it did not show a dramatic impact on their vote choice or their turnout. Now, you could argue that the pandemic and, I guess attempts by the Republicans to suppress the vote had a big impact on that. But turnout overall across the entire country was up like everywhere, like by a huge amount compared to 2016. So I don't know if that stands a test when you compare it to other places.
I have a second question for you. Okay. This is the second question that I have for you. If the you and I both agree that the National Democratic Party did not run on defund the police, right?
Hi.
That's correct. I agree.
That's correct, right? But the Republicans did their very best to say that the National Democratic Party and Joe Biden were running on defund the police, which actually means abolish the police, which actually means kill cops, right? That's what the Republican Party was doing, right?
Yeah, they branded
they branded it as that, right? Yes. So if the National Democratic Party was not running on that, and the Republicans were claiming that the National Democratic Party was running on that, then how can you state that it's the activists that are hurting the people, that are hurting the Democrats, when they themselves have spent all of their time, effort, and energy on not necessarily trying to reframe the narrative, but instead adopt a reactionary point of view that the Republicans had laid out for them by saying, guys, this is really bad. This is playing really poorly on the ground as a consequence of the multi-million-dollar Republican media operation literally controlling what defund the police means with imagery of burning small businesses and whatnot, and like crying black small business owners. If they were doing that, and what we were doing on the leftist side, or on the Democratic side rather, was just also shitting on the left and the activists on the ground who were saying it, instead of saying, look, this messaging that the Republicans are fighting or pushing is completely false. Defund the police just simply means demilitarize the police or reform the police. If Democrats did that, don't you think that would be a more effective strategy rather than constantly fucking complaining, just like the Republicans have been complaining about defund the police as a movement?
I think there's not enough evidence. This is my whole argument. My argument isn't blaming this on defund the police. I've actually argued against that because there was an organic surge in rural turnout and Republican vote share in counties. We don't necessarily have full precinct level data right now, or individual data, right, on individual voters that vote in every place. But there was a wave and surge in rural turnout that probably wasn't even like derived from defund messaging. That just happened because Trump is like the non-college educated white person's Barack Obama, right? My whole argument has been that it isn't blaming defund. It's that the messaging is not working on turning out the voters most impacted by it, in effect. Okay? That's my argument.
Okay. Part of that is because I would assume, because the multi-million-dollar propaganda machine on the Republican side is shitting on it and saying it just means like, kill cops or allow criminals to do whatever the fuck they want to your daughters. And the Democratic side is saying, yeah, this is making us look really bad, sweaty. So maybe in that circumstance, an actual grassroots movement that was created around legitimate grievances is not going to be as effective. A similar conversation could be had about the civil rights movement. I know that you know that this is the case. MLK, at the time of his assassination, was viewed very unfavorably. They called him a communist agitator. They called him someone who did not want equality, but like radical change that was going to undermine the way of American life. They said that he was his anti-war messaging was bad. They said that his messaging around the segregation in the Jim Crow South was bad, and constantly shit on him, and it was effective. That doesn't mean it was wrong. Same with defund the police. So if you have a cause that's just, as I've said time and time again, you have to advocate for it, and you have to correct the messaging. Democrats don't, and instead fall victim to the reactionary framing time and time again. An example I can use that's more modern than the civil rights movement is Black Lives Matter. When Black Lives Matter first came out, the exact same arguments that conservatives were applying to defund the police right now, they were applying to Black Lives Matter. Wait a minute. What do you mean Black Lives Matter? That's kind of selfish. I'm white. I think white lives matter. Well, wait a minute. All lives matter. Black Lives Matter actually means kill cops. Look, it says, kill pigs, fry them like bacon. That's what Black Lives Matter really means. Or when Colin Kaepernick took a knee during the national anthem, they said he hates America. He's a terrorist. And this is exactly what the BLM movement is. What did the Democrats do back then? You know what the Democrats did back then. The National Democratic Party also took a similar stance as they did to defund the police as they did to Black Lives Matter back then. They said, Sweaty, this is a bad look. They said, Sweaty, this is going to help us. This is going to hurt us in the elections process. This is going to hurt us because they, once again, took the side, the reactionary framing, and advocated for it hook, line, and sinker because of their fear of the mythical moderate that is going to be persuaded by reactionary politics.
Well,
okay,
Hasan,
what made them change?
On a unified marketing.
Okay, but what made them change? Do you know what made them change? Do you know why Black Lives Matter hit mainstream in the liberal circle at least?
That's the way you're saying though. You're like painting this as like some national thing when electorally where the actual messaging on defund was actually spent was down ballot. The Trump campaign and the Trump IEs didn't spend big national dollars, even in battleground states, on running it. Okay. It was spent in targeted Senate races. So like in Arizona, in Colorado, where both places didn't really work.
Wait, are you saying that anti-defund the police messaging was not national, was not a fundamental part of the national Republican Party?
Yeah, if you go actually look at presidential advertising, both from the RNC and the Trump campaign and their super PACs, it was not the bulk of their negative messaging.
So when Donald Trump was talking about law and order every night, when he was talking about how this is Joe Biden's America, where like your suburbs are going to be on fire, you think that did not have a national impact? Do you think, or inversely, let me ask you this other question. Do you think when Brad Parscale purchases $1 million worth of ads in for example, the Washington, D.C. area, do you think they're doing that to appease Donald Trump's sensibilities, or do you think that that's actually a communicable interest of the campaign? Like,
that was
people
literally appeasing Donald Trump.
I know, exactly. You and I both agree. So obviously, ad dollars can be spent in foolish ways from time to time. But what still matters more than anything else is the earned media, the millions and millions of dollars of earned media that Donald Trump accrued while simultaneously whipping up the narrative that defund the police, and doing it successfully, by the way, to a degree, that defund the police means killing cops, or defund the police means that your daughters are going to be fucked in the suburbs by black people. And the only way to combat against that is by effectively reframing the narrative. If you want to have a conversation that revolves around messaging, you have to do something.
That wasn't the goal of like the Democratic Party, as you stated. Okay. And it's because it becomes a losing battle trying to defend it. You can't get your own message out. Now, the problem is if they actually had,
Wait, why? But I thought we were all on board with reforming the police.
Will you let me explain this?
Okay, go ahead. But we are though, right?
And then you went. What was that?
But we are all on board with reforming the police at the very least, right? Like accountability, maybe taking funds away from them and
here's the problem. The activists have branded it back to the 3 words, right? So strongly that it is easier for the other side. It is an easier lift to even push through earned media, pushing defund the police, as opposed to reform the police or some other slogan that would work, right? People have short attention spans. It's a lot easier lift. They spend a lot of money branding that to help, honestly, also like suppress black turnout, specifically in urban areas. And I think because of that, the lift and the amount of money you would have to spend, the party would have to spend to rebrand it, it's a loser on return on investment. And now that sucks because, I want to see like police law enforcement reform dramatically. Okay. But if you have limited resources, limited amount of time, limited attention span for people, spending a bunch of money on having to rebrand something that activists won't even get on board with, like to do themselves, and are pushing more earned media on it on the positive side, is like a losing battle. And I think I strongly disagree on the earned media part being more effective, like nationally, because I don't think it had a dramatic impact on the national election, on the
But I thought you
presidential election.
originally said
I think
that
it had an
defund the
impact
police
on
was the
down ballot.
reason. But I thought you said defund the police originally was the reason that that like there was
No,
underperformance.
you misinterpreted what I said.
But that's what
I
you
said that
literally
if it
came on board with. You
would
said
have
black
actually
people.
worked,
You
if
said
defund
black.
messaging
Wait, I
works,
gotta turn on. I gotta
surge in
close
urban
my.
turnout.
I gotta
If
close my
defund
window. Sorry,
messaging
it's
works,
very
we didn't
loud. I
see a
can't hear
surge in
you.
urban turnout, and we didn't. We
It's
didn't see
super
a
loud in
surge
the
urban
background.
black
H Bizzle, hold on 1 second. Hold your thought. I can't hear anything you're saying. I gotta close my window right now. 1 second.
Hi, chat.
Sorry.
Chat, you know I love y'all.
Sorry. There was
Y'all hate me, but I
landscaping
love y'all, chat.
happening.
All
The
right,
thin
so
green line. Okay, go on.
well, so here's my point though. If it had a positive impact, we would have actually seen a surge in turnout in urban black areas, and we actually didn't. It was ridiculously flat in Milwaukee, in Detroit, in Philadelphia. It was not as
Hassan, please
flat.
stop
Obviously,
debating
actually,
kindergartners.
it
It's
actually
embarrassing.
pretty much was in Fulton County in the inner city area of Georgia. If you look at Broward, other places, black precincts did not do as well down in Florida. So my argument is that isn't that it caused that to be, uh, that to actually not that it wasn't the reason why it was that. It's just that it didn't have an effect. Okay. And if
Wait,
you're
but
depending on
Democrats
something that
didn't run
doesn't have
on
an
defund the
impact,
police, right?
what was that?
But Democrats didn't run on defund the police, right?
No, like,
Then
but
why
this is
would it
what
have it?
you're not
Then why
getting
would it
though.
have an effect or an impact?
Because there was hundreds of millions of dollars spent by independent expenditures and super PACs on like defund messaging, on like reform messaging, right? Like that we need to reform police departments, and Democrat candidates were for that, right? That was spent under the radar and had almost zero impact, it looks like. Now that's like way more nuanced.
Wait. So you're saying that you're saying that the Democrats did run on it, or super PACs did run on defund?
No, they spent money around like reform the police concept. They weren't saying defund because it did not show. When you did polling on defund, it didn't change people's enthusiasm or vote choice among black voters, like at all. It didn't have that effect. And they spent on reform messaging and it still didn't have an effect. That's my whole point, is it does not have a positive impact on vote choice or turnout, like enthusiasm, right? And so if it
David
doesn't
Dayen
have
is
a
in chat ready
positive
for Cyberpunk.
impact,
Has buff,
maybe
has
we
buff.
need to adjust the messaging some. Like I think that it is a loser as an issue in this last election because it only benefited one side, and that was the opposite side, and it helped in down ballot races
But it
and moving those people back who flipped over, those white moderates out in the burbs who voted for Biden. They came back strongly to the other side of the ballot, Republican side of the ballot, all the way down the rest of the ballot. It's about 1% to 2% across most of those battleground states, and it might have had that impact on it. And that means it's a winner for the GOP and conservatives. And it was a loser on our side, unfortunately.
okay. The reason why it was a loser on our side, and the argument that I'm making has not been tested yet, with the exception of how we can utilize or how messaging has changed around activist causes. Okay, like looking at historic trends. But the argument that I'm making is that the reason why this messaging was insignificant on our end, but was a significant part of the Republican strategy that was relatively effective, right, is because we didn't run on it. We didn't run on anything of that in that side. We ran away from even talking about it for the most part, and at the very most, like, we scolded the fucking people who were protesting and talked equally about property damage rather than the underlying causes of it. Now, what I always say is messaging is what you make it, okay? Sloganeering is what you make it. A slogan is empty without the narrative that you craft around it. Obviously, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea is not democratic, right? It's something that you and I think agree on. Just like pro-life is not necessarily about, just like pro-life is not about preserving the sanctity of life, but it's about forcing women to carry pregnancies to term. Now, Republicans aren't running on that. They're running on pro-life because they have successfully rebranded.
Hassle.
They've successfully rebranded a reactionary point of view that they have into something that is marketable, and then communicate that to as large an audience as possible. And they do that regardless of the fact that 75% of the country believes that Roe v. Wade should remain as it is. As in, 75% of Americans believe that every American should be able to get a legal and safe abortion, especially in the first trimester, without any sort of intervention or interference in that matter, right? 75% of Americans believe this, and yet Republicans still agitate, advocate, make it seem like 100% of Americans believe that, like, you know, everyone's pro-life. We gotta save these babies. They're fucking murdering babies. They do this because it emboldens their base. They do this because it galvanizes them. They do this because it's an effective turnout strategy. We don't do that exact same thing on the Democratic side. And that's the failure. That's the failure. That is what I am saying. That's what my anger is. And now the reason why Republicans can do this versus Democrats can't is because there are no grassroots Republican activist organizations for the most part. They are mostly completely manicured from top down. They appeal to specific interests. These wedge issues are... What's up?
Like all the Koch brother efforts.
Yes, exactly. They appeal to specific subsects of the Republican Party, like abortion being a primary motivator. I know.
Part of the reason that
so
works
loud.
The way the way coalitions on the left and right work is different. On the right, because it is uniform in ethnicity in effect, right, and also age. You see a lot of coalitions under their tent that are based around ideological beliefs, right? On the Dem side, because of how we are organized in effect, you know, you see a lot more of coalitions built around ethnic identity or gender identity or like sexuality, issues like that are what like are more binding to people.
But we're not even talking about that right now. We're talking about police reform, which is something that impacts all identities, and even then that's not true. The reality is, like, Republicans don't give a fuck about, like, a Republican in California doesn't give a fuck about coal miners. They've been taught to care about coal miners.
What that means for messaging wise, right?
I know, but it's training. It's training, and we don't engage in that training. That's what my entire point is.
I agree with that. Like, the only vessels that really do that are like the labor movement in effect. Like, that's
okay. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah. You and I are in agreement there as well. Yeah. The point is that Republicans train. They look at what the specific interest points are for some people. Okay, they look at specific interest points are for some groups that you can draw turnout in. All right. White supremacist.
Here's my one counter on that. The Republicans have hard evidence of that working. Right. They've driven turnout again and again. Among those groups around those issues. You have like the Bush era, you have the gay marriage amendments all over the place, right? That drove a huge swath of turnout. You've seen evidence of it from judicial picks. On the Dem side, you have no evidence of that at all. The only times you have some evidence of things doing that are in certain states where there's a larger Latino population, and it wasn't by anything the Dems did, it was by the Republicans overstepping and passing laws like
SMB 10 or
whatever it was. I forgot the number, the proposition, right?
Yeah.
Now, the problem that presents for Dems is we actually have no example outside of Barack Obama. He's literally it, of showing a thing like, you know, I wouldn't even call his messaging the reason why. I think it was because of who he was, right? Or is. That has actually driven that turnout among those groups. Here's the other reason why some of the strategies on our side are, like, I think fundamentally flawed. Do you know which ethnic group has the highest percentage turnout out of any in America? If you look at like race,
black women.
Well, black women, but black voters in general. it has a hugely higher rate of turnout percentage than white voters and especially than Latino voters. So a huge portion of Democratic strategy is based around boosting turnout among a group that is already exceeding the turnout rates of everyone else, which means you're like going to a well that's almost dry, right? There's just not as much there to get. And I think that's a huge problem. Now, like your points about messaging and mobilizing people around Latino voters, I think something that there hasn't been enough money spent or attention spent by the Democratic Party. I think Chuck is really right on a lot of this because I did politics in Texas and that's where I learned my politics.
So wait,
and to get turnout among those groups, you have to show up.
Okay, that's true.
Defund is not targeted on that group. That's the one reason why defund,
Love ya, buddy.
I think, is like it's a problem.
It's just not targeted ever. The point is, it's not targeted, and it wasn't utilized at all. And if it was utilized, it wasn't adequately messaged around. The only time when defund was mentioned was to still adopt a Republican right-wing reactionary framing and to run defense against it rather than run offense. So it was untested. But what we can look at and what we can see is instances where actual grassroots mobilization has led to change that has truly changed our understanding of justice, equality, okay, and civil rights, and changes that we take for granted now, whether it be the right of black people to be able to vote, whether it's no longer having Jim Crow laws and the civil rights movement, or whether it even be from a more contemporary example, the difference in opinion within Black Lives Matter and how it tested early on 4 years ago, 5 years ago versus Black Lives Matter and how it tests now. Barack Obama, as I mentioned before, called
BLM has all the credit in the world. It's one of the most effective social justice movements.
Okay, but Democrats tried to fucking neuter BLM as well originally, and the only reason why they got and I remember the turn. I was there. I was covering the news at that point. I was an advocate for BLM. Liberals would tell me exactly like you are right now that like BLM is bad, looks sweaty, it's bad optics, it's not a good motivator for turnout, and it's not great, and it's a bad look. Obama personally said Colin Kaepernick needs to think about all of the families of veterans that he is upsetting when he kneels for the national anthem. Ruth Bader Ginsburg said that that Kaepernick was stupid for doing this. There were plenty of prominent liberals that were anti-BLM and anti-Kaepernick. Do you know what the turn was? The turn was when Donald Trump started shitting on Black Lives Matter and Colin Kaepernick. That's when every liberal was like, wait a minute, we got to get on board with this. Okay?
Yeah, I realize that's because partisanship is like a terrible drug.
Okay, but it's not. But it's not a terrible drug, which is why, what do I always say? Then remind people that we are basically advocating to give more guns to an unaccountable force of Republican paramilitaries that go into black neighborhoods and deal with black people violently. But that's one way to reframe the conversation about defund the police. But we never do that. Instead, what do? We say defund the police is bad. Please stop saying it. You try to tell activists to shut the fuck up. If you are the Progressive Party, you can't tell one of the most significant social movements of our generation that has gotten international attention to sit the fuck down and shut the fuck up. Republicans would never do that in a million years. They would jerk off at the opportunity they can find another wedge issue that gets people out on the fucking streets. Okay?
Because they look at elections.
Exactly, because they want to fucking win elections. Democrats, on the other hand, do not. Democrats, on the other hand, operate like they don't want to win elections, where they think about this mythical moderate.
I don't think this goes back to my point about black turnout overall, Hasan. Like, I actually believe that the Democratic Party, and because of black culture in America, like which was solidified during the Civil Rights Movement, where black turnout surged dramatically, okay? They keep going to...
it went from 0 to 1.
But like the fact that black turnout is so much higher than white or Latino or Asian American Pacific Islander turnout is not like a It's something that was created due to leadership in the Black community that has persisted as part of Black culture. And, like that is something that, if you already, there's a limit to how many people you can get out and convince to go vote. And you can make an impact on voting, I think. Now, there are a huge amount of disaffected Latino voters and probably younger white voters that Democrats do not message with and do not try to create wedge issues to turn out, that I think they could do a lot better. I argue for that in meetings all the fucking time because people don't want to do that. The Biden campaign, though, made a bet on that. They did not think they could do anything or spend money or create earned media around anything that would boost a lot of turnout in either the Black community or also in these other groups, because the whole election was defined by Donald Trump.
Yeah, a referendum.
Yeah, it turned out just like that. I've been talking about that with you for like months now, right? Now that bet looks successful, but it caused a cratering down ballot. Like, down ballot, Democrats are dealing with a nightmare scenario where Republicans are having control of redistricting, and literally the Democratic majority in the House is so small right now, it could be gone in 2 years because of redistricting. And that's the problem they're dealing with now. They're trying to blame like defund. This is why I'm not blaming it for what happened. I just think it didn't have an effect. That's my one argument. Like, I agree with you. It did not cause what happened. They're trying to use it to shirk blame because people are trying to cover their ass, right? And, like DC is a city of covering your ass, because the honest truth is that, like, and you brought this up, political money has little effect in a nationalized election environment. It doesn't do shit, right? Earned media has a bigger effect, which you brought up. And people need something to blame. Everyone's spamming goalposts. This is maybe goalposts moving because
it is definitely,
the heart of
but it's fine. It's fine. Look, hey, look, we are in, as long as we are in agreement, this is not about.
You were accusing me of trying to blame it. My argument from the start is I just don't think.
No, everybody stop saying backtracking. It doesn't matter. Okay. It doesn't matter.
I claim I'm doing that, but Chad, have I been saying from the start that I didn't think defund had a positive impact?
You're not going to get you're not going to get people on board with your argument here.
Look, some of them are saying yes. So thank you for the ones paying attention. I appreciate that. All right. But like, I don't know. This is what I honestly think about all this. Hasan, after 2016, I was incredibly critical of the Clinton campaign, like publicly, like in Democratic operative circles, like literally calling them out at meetings with 200, 300 plus operatives in big rooms. All right. Like, I was known for this, like just ripping them to shreds.
I'm looking at your original takes that got me to bring you on, by the way.
Yeah.
If anything you were saying is accurate, we would have seen a surge in African-American turnout during the election, when we saw the complete opposite, and in fact, an increase in Trump support that is likely not completely disconnected from defund messaging due to Black men in high crime areas being turned off by it.
Which I still stand by, because I've seen that the surge in violent crime where I literally live. I live in a, somewhat oddly gentrified neighborhood, right? And people are more scared here about it. People are scared for their own safety.
But that's drastically different than the conversation that we're having right now, where defund in and of itself did not have an impact. Where you originally said it certainly did have an impact, and that people adopted the right-wing framing of it. And I'm saying that yes, it's because of the media agitation and the right-wing framing around defund that made it not as appealing to people, and that Democrats should counter message around it rather than adopt the reactionary point of view. Anyway, this is just gloating at this point, so I'm not going to do this. But
it is stupid messaging because of that, though. People still. What was my first argument? It was about the slogan, right? People take you at what you say and what those three words mean, right? That's why I gave the example for Nike. It's like a great, incredible.
No, but Nike is a terrible example, because because corporate branding is literally the opposite.
Yeah, but you're not. My point is on linguistics. It's not on what the goal of the branding is, right? Like, the reform the police movement, which is actually what it really is, was branded as
It's not though.
defund.
It's not just reforming the police. Like
As you
Well,
have taught me
this
that
is
it
this is
okay
like
to
an
be humble and
actual
metamorphose
descriptive
into
point of
the
action.
chunks of finishing
Resources
BS